Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for coming today, and we have a special topic, and we're very lucky to have George amongst us. So he will be conducting the seminars today. I'll let you introduce yourself quickly, and then the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Kia ora tātou katoa, ko George Haremate aho. I've just formally introduced myself without going into too much detail. My name is George. I grew up here in what was a little satellite town called Hallsville, and now it's a suburb of Christchurch. By the time I was 10 years old, I was able to tie my own flies and catch fish in these rivers and the lakes and all that around here. And I guess being in the country, which it kind of was, we thought we owned everything from Hallsville to Lincoln. But for children, that was a wonderful playground, and we took every advantage of it that we could. I left Christchurch in 1977 to go wander the world for the best part of 35 years, and upon my return with a family in tow, I've come to find things are quite different here. And for me it's quite sad knowing what I used to be able to do, what my ancestors were able to do. Well, about my Māori history, I am both from this region and from the region just north of here, called Wairua, which is Little River area, Southern Banks Peninsula. One of the interesting things about those two tribes of people is they went and had a civil war in the 1820s, and my family happened to be in the middle of it because one of them was from up the north part and one of them was from was from here. And so the name of that civil war was called the Eat Relations Feud. And in my family there were seven children, and after that civil war there were only 2. So that can tell you, that was the effect of the civil war on my family alone. But if we bring it forward to today, we've had some severe degradation of our whenua, our land, our waterways in our area. And so that's partially what I'm here to do today, to kind of address what Māori environmental decision making looks like from a Māori perspective. Okay, where are we? Reducing nitrogen. So I'm in a program called Reducing Nitrogen Losses from Farms. Our program is presently in the 4th year of its 5-year study. We are funded by the government, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. We're testing 7 different fodder crops grown under different fertilisation and irrigation regimes to identify properties of plants that help reduce nitrogen losses from farms. And we are doing it at the Ashley Dean Test Farm, which is probably about 3 miles down the road here. Okay, we are finding some interesting things. The same crops that we're testing under the fertiliser and irrigation regimes are being trialled in different combinations to complement each other in reducing nitrogen losses from farms. For example, lucerne is one of the fodder crops that they've studied quite completely. They've kind of mapped out what lucerne does. And in the main, lucerne is a very, very good summer crop. It's a crop that the cows like to eat. It doesn't affect production in any way. And it's also good as a crop that can be cut and stored for later use. The biggest problem with lucerne is that it goes dormant over winter. And in actuality, most nitrogen leaching occurs during winter, so if we want a good summer crop, and if we want a good crop that is going to produce good feed throughout the winter, lucerne's a good option. But when it comes to wintertime, it's useless. Okay, so, and even some of the grasses and things that they're testing, like for example, they're doing a ryegrass and an Italian ryegrass, where the properties are very much different. You'd think that they are quite similar, but they are quite different as well. So what they hope to be able to do is map out all these different plants and the seasons that they grow best under and the conditions, the irrigation regimes that they work best on, and work them in combinations into pastures. Because we know that one plant in particular, plantain, will actually help reduce the nitrogen in urine. However, the cows do urine more frequently. So there could be a benefit or not a benefit, depending on which way you look at things. But with these kinds of things, traits known about plants, it's easier to be able to start to see where they fit with each other. Okay. Now, also in this project, they're doing some modelling, so they'll be able to say, well, 10 years of doing this and mixed with that, we'll be able to have these results. And the modelling departments are very, very capable. Their methodology is good, and they can do it up to, accuracy 50 years or so. That's very, very helpful. They are also DNA sampling soil in an effort to understand how soil works. Now, for Māori, it's a very interesting one because for us, there is a thing called Māori, which is the building block of all life. And to us, DNA sampling of the soil looks like they are trying to determine the existence of Māori. But it's not. But that's just how it looks. Okay. Our task within this project is to introduce kaitiakitanga into dairy production. So what we did was we designed an indigenous framework for land use decision making, and we had to introduce it to the local Māori people who are Taumutu, and we're also in the process of writing articles for submissions to journals. Interestingly enough, this is one of the first projects where dairy scientists and Māori have actually sat down together and actually figured out a way together, and it's on that aspect alone, this has been a very, very interesting journey for me, because as far as I was concerned before this, I couldn't wait to kill a farmer and they couldn't wait to kill me. That's just the way it was. We were dead against them, and well, we have a history, and I'm about to go into that right now. How do I move the...
Press on the arrows or on use the mouse.
Yep. Okay. So to go into the history, I'm just going to try to skip through this quite quickly. My knowledge base is here in the South Island. I know a lot about the Māori. I know everything that happened and how the land was taken down here, blah, blah, blah. But what happened was we got placed in open-air confinement, and after 1839 we owned the whole lot, 66 million hectares, and now we own 1 million hectares of those 66. We were placed in open-air confinement, and 2 months after the settlers got here, they made legislation that Māori would never play any part in any kind of decision-making whatsoever. So the settlers got the land, and they all got rich off the timber they cut off the land before they started farming, and farming proved to be even more lucrative. But the thing that really broke our systems down were private property rights, water allocation, and then refrigeration, which was pioneered in New Zealand, made farmers a dominant economic, political powerhouse from which Māori would never recover. And in that time, from Māori perspective, economic and environmental regulation has undoubtedly favoured farmers. The blueprint for building wealth in New Zealand was, most Māori don't qualify for this, to obtain land. There's financing available, there's advice available. You operate a dairy farm for as long as you can. I ran the numbers from 2018. The average farmer makes $1,000 a day, plus financial incentives and tax breaks, etc. And then they sell up and enjoy their capital gains. That's the pattern for wealth in New Zealand. Fine. But this model promoted privatised gains for a few, and it socialised all of the losses, and here we are. Okay, so, finally figuring out that it's not really working too well. So, to get right to the nub of the issue, what do Māori want? Well, I've included the top two pieces in purple because they are governance tools. Okay? We want inclusion in land use decision making, and we want our knowledge to be recognised as equal. This is it at a governance level. There is a group working now in this area called the Tuia Group, which was set up very well with that in mind, and it worked very, very well under a co-governance model. Now, for Māori regular people like me, what do I want? This is all in brown, or orange. I was going to, never mind. Got a little private joke there that I won't share with you. To be able to gather quantities of healthy food, traditional food in season. Okay, the key words there are quantities and healthy. Okay? We also want our water to be able to be used safely for recreation. That means swimmable. It doesn't mean drinkable. We don't want to clean it up. Purely clean water is not that good for you anyway. The absence, then you're experiencing an absence of life. And our underpinning principle, our mātauranga, is very important, and it has remained the same from thousands and thousands of years ago. You know, the way we want to do it, the way we want to do things has been as it's always been. Now, when you look at it in this context, to be able to gather quantities of healthy and traditional food in season, doesn't sound like we're asking too much, does it? And when you say water being able to be used safely for recreation, we're talking about swimming, boating, kayaking, whatever. And that's for everybody as well. Okay, so I'll come back to that in a little bit about what Māori want. But going along with what I've said already, if we switch back to the Western realm of things, we want research questions with indigenous themes. For example, the project that I am involved in is called Reducing Nitrogen Losses from Farms. Well, my first question was, what about E. coli? What about the potassium? What about the steroids? What about the growth hormones? What about the antibiotics? Right? And this is the problem. This is the big problem. This is a big sticking point for Māori. However, being in the research game, you realise that, I'm going to touch on this again a little bit in a minute, but this is the way the government does things, and you've got to comply, or otherwise you don't get funding and you're not going to get a voice in the game. Comply, 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 comply. Māori also want the same opportunities afforded the rest of society to farm. Back in the day when settlers first got here, they tied up Māori land so we couldn't develop it. There was no financing available. There was no industry help. We were stuck. And so people would come along and say, oh, you're not using your land. Why don't you sell it? Oh, yeah, the land's no good to me. And that's what happened. If not, a lot of it got taken. But we've also proved that when given the opportunity to be able to do things that mainstream society does, we're really, really good at it. For example, my family in Banks Peninsula, we owned a schooner. And we transporting goods up and down the coast and all the rest of it. And yes, we were even involved in the New Zealand slave trade. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But all we need is the opportunity afforded to the rest of society, and we would perform well. There's a farm right down here in Wakaya, which won the Māori Farm of the Year 3 years ago. You know, so and it's a dairy farm. Now, what we've been learning over this long period of time, I kind of present to you in a question. Because our kaupapa, the way we do things, hasn't changed at all, and because we want such general things for everybody, and because we're so far away, should Māori be managing the environment? Should? Would we be able to get things done better, more efficiently, with less red tape? I don't know. But the point is that society has come full circle. You know, once upon a time, our knowledge and things was disregarded as rubbish and nonsense and fairy tales. But all of a sudden, science has hit a wall and they've come back. Ha! It's a story. Western science, very, very powerful institution. Very, very powerful. Religion, science, enforcement, pillars of society. As I said, it replaced Mātauranga Māori. We were shoved to the back. Oh, what you know doesn't mean anything. However, what we've found is science, Western science, works amazingly well when the knowledge is classified as equal and when the people are willing to work together. The point being is that Mātauranga, we know how the environment should be. We spent thousands of years looking at it and studying it from every conceivable angle. We don't know particularly what's wrong, but we know when it's wrong. And that's what science is good for. Science can drill into those little things. Like, for example, in the old days, when settlers first got here, there was an issue with some polluted water. The Māori solution was some Māori fella come along and poured a bag of sugar in it. Why? Because sugar improves water, improves the taste of water. So they naturally thought, well, it must be able to improve this kind of water as well. Of course they were wrong, but this was our science. It was an experiment. Doesn't matter if it fails, at least we learned, right? Okay. Like I said, science has hit a wall. They don't know how to simultaneously increase or sustain productivity and clean the environment. And scientists are very, very interesting people. I take my hat off to scientists. They're very interesting. Scientists are interested in their research. They don't care what's done with it. Now think of the implications of that. That has some very, very dangerous implications, but it also has some very benign implications which are very, very helpful. Okay? We've all seen examples. Well, take, for example, a cluster bomb. You think the guy who invented a cluster bomb thought it was ever going to be used in the way it was, where half of them wouldn't explode and blow children's legs off 20 years down the track? No. No, no, no. You know, this is what happens. Now, what we've found, which is very, very surprising, is that the dairy scientists that I'm involved with, which are some of the top dairy scientists in the country, they're seeking to adopt new practice, and the farmers are as well. But the gap is how? Like, we're all a bit tentative to talk to each other, we're all a little bit, what's this guy about? But I know what the answer is. It's, hello, my name is George, how are you? What's so hard about that? No, it's not. It's not. But the problem with Western science is their methods. Piecemeal projects, like I said, my project is about removing nitrogen. Well, E. coli moves through the soil in exactly the same way that nitrogen does. And it's just as harmful, but in a different way. Right? Whereas the other, nitrogen and E. coli will run through the soil if there's, in this district, 50 millimeters of rain will push anything in the soil through down into the aquifers. Right? So that's all it takes. Because the Selwyn District is dominated by shallow, stony soil. And that's what happens here. So the land might be all sweet, but it's not. But the aquifers and the water, we used to have family outings at Coes and Chamberlain's Fort all the time. I'm ashamed to take my children there now. I wouldn't do. Look, we were forever dunking each other and splashing each other. I must have drunk gallons of that water as a kid. But boy, I wouldn't even put my toe in it now, It's disgusting. The other problem I find with Western science goes along with the piecemeal projects and research questions. So, there are limited time frames. Budgets. Budgets are a big one. And control. Well, because if you're working with a group of Māori, and somebody dies, it's all over. You're not going to get any work done for a week. And if you've got a timeline or a budget to conform to, it's gone. It's gone. Okay, but the government has kind of come to our backs, and they've done it in two ways. The first one is that all research funding bids must include a vision Mātauranga concept, which means that they have to apply apply it to a Māori context, and they have to include Māori in their projects. And I was doing this for where I last worked, and one of the senior management came up to me and asked me if this was affirmative action for Māori, and I said no. Of course it's not. And another one, and the other interesting anomaly that came out of that was I could not find any Māori carpet manufacturers to place a Vision Mātauranga component upon. So anyway, those are the little interesting issues that are coming up. Sideline helps for us to be making environmental decisions. So the summary of our early progress with the dairy science, it was really, really tentative, okay? But what we had to do was we had to get them out of the Ashley Dean farm, okay? Because Māori want to look at things in a complete district context. In this case, it is the Selwyn District. And so we had to introduce the principle of ki uta tiki tai, which means that everything is related and everything must be taken into context as a whole, not just one little test farm in the middle of the district. Okay, and then the second piece of progress we made was the introduction of Te Mana Aotearoa, that all waterways deserve special attention. Again, the scientists were focused on their little piece, but we had to broaden their minds. The interesting thing was that once we did, they accepted it and they were willing to work with it, and we're working off the same timesheet. Timesheet? Page. Anyway, so we started to introduce more Māori concepts, and we were pleasantly surprised at how willing, how receptive they were, and how willing they were to work with us. So, because I'm working off the premise that we want to take each other out the back shed and have a few conversations about things. So, the first concept we need to understand about Māori environmental decision making is the concept of Māori. I could stand here and go on and on and on for about an hour, and you probably wouldn't understand Māori any more than you would if I said that Māori is the primary life essence contained in all living things. And it's, I don't know, very similar in Christian religion, I guess. The Māori position about Māori is that those using sacred resources have a duty to maintain and improve them for the future. And most research projects take the track of maintaining, preserving, creating Māori. Okay. Water receives the most public attention. Māori were quite aware of water. There's over 60 names for water. There's over 60 names for soil, and the air as well. Air pollution doesn't really get much press in this district, but mainly because it's windy. The problems simply blow away. While Māori had input on land and water, we had no input on managing air. Land pollution is hardly mentioned. Well, we all know it's there. It's kind of like it's taken for granted that if the water is bad, the land isn't too flash either. Right. Does anybody have any questions so far? Is it making sense? Okay, that's the main thing. So here it is. This is the framework we designed. The word take is actually taki, and taki means an issue, a proposal. Say, for example, a person is proposing to start a new farm or maybe expand their existing venture. That's a taki. The taki is applied to the taonga. The taonga, for want of a better word, is a treasure. There are mainly two types of taonga. There's taonga, good on me, I've forgotten the names. One of them is sacred sites, wahi tapu. Where like cemeteries, battlegrounds, stuff like that. And the other one is precious sites. For example, in the Selwyn District, the gem is Te Waihora, the lake. And no more perfect example exists than Te Waihora. So, the proposal is measured against the treasures or the features of that land. From there we can determine who the kaitiaki are. Kaitiaki are the people mandated by the runanga, by the group of Māori who are from the district, to act in their behalf. The people with authority to make decisions, environmental decisions. The kaitiaki will take the taki, or the proposal, and they will apply our rules and regulations, Māori rules and regulations. The Selwyn, the Taumutu Runanga has had an environmental plan since 2003. While it needs to be updated, it remains. And so this is the standard, and the thresholds are mentioned within the tikanga. Now, from the tikanga, a work practice or a ritenga, a work process, a product, that's what that means. And from there, a kaupapa or a method of doing something that has the Māori at its essence, results. Okay, that's it in its most simple form. We have been working on it, and there is some revisions that are being made, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, remember, first the taki is what is the issue or the proposal. Kaitiaki is mana whenua mandated people with the authority to act for the people, the area or the natural resource. The kaitiaki identify any potential threat to the treasure, the sacred resource, by using our cultural values and processes, and the actual practices that may be required to maintain or enhance the Māori of that area. However, applicants may be questioned about any matters that arise from the framework at any time. See, this is how we've kind of modified it. See, from kaitiaki, hold on, take it back to here. From somebody applying for something, having the sacred resources identified, and then the people who are in charge of it applying the regulations and rules that we have, questions may arise at this point, not necessarily here. So the biggest change that I've made to it so far is that we might have to do a revised taki right here. But it can occur from anywhere from here to here. Okay, does that make sense? While this was designed by Māori and basically for Māori, as you can see, it can be used by anybody. It's no secret. All you have to do is introduce yourself. Okay, like I said earlier in my little spiel here, there are 2 new discussion papers indicating changes that highlight Māori concepts to inform policy. Okay, first of all, they are going to be kaitiaki informed, which means that they will have to rely on experts. These biodiversity and freshwater policy statements, they acknowledge that the legal and regulatory frameworks are not achieving enough. And if you've ever read the Haremate, you would see why. And it's got a goal of a full range of ecosystems on land and water that are healthy and functioning. I don't know. You're the students, you tell me, is that asking too much? Is it what we all want, or is it just what some of us want, or just the farmers maybe? Okay? But what those 2 discussion papers really brought out was the respecting the mana of freshwater, which is te mana o te wai. We are the water is us. In our creation stories, we're all equal, we're all the same. Because we're humans and because we're a little bit more advanced than the others, that means we get to dominate, but it also means we have a major responsibility. And often that is the part that is forgotten or overlooked. Okay, one of the most interesting things to me is that they will elevate the status of Mahinga to a compulsory value. Once they do that, Māori will have taken great big stride towards where they want to be. At the moment, mana whenua of Tamutu are told that there are so many heavy metals in the eels right now that they recommend that you should only eat one a week. Unheard of. We used to be able to take them in the thousands. Now this is crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. All right, so starting the Māori perspective on this, on how to clean the environment, is to take the Mahinga Kai perspective. And if the regenerative capacity of the lake is good, if we can reduce the turbidity of the water and make the water a little bit clearer, if we can replace the planting that was lost in 1968, for God's sake, Wahine disaster, we will start to make some inroads. But until we stop looking at little bits and pieces, until we start taking things on a more holistic perspective, like the way we've always wanted to do, and the way that society seems to be coming back to, I believe we're all going to make some serious progress. So, in conclusion, where are we in 2020? Ko Aotearoa, ko te awa, ko ao. I am the river is me. Okay? These are Maori proverbs. Toi tu te marae o tani mahuta, toi tu te marae o Tangaroa, toi tu te tangata. If the land is well and the sea is well, the people will thrive. However, what we have is ngā te apo te tangata ka punaki ngā kino katoa te awa. From the greed of man, the disrespect for the river became apparent. Okay, I want to open the floor for some questions now. If you have any questions about the MSF or what we're up to, please, now's your time. Are you all happy with that as you see it? Happy with the way the land is? No? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Any questions, discussions, inspirations? You raised an interesting point about it's not just about nitrogen, but about all these other factors like E. coli, growth hormones, and how we are disregarding them. Are there any strategies on tackling these issues?
Well, let me start. Let me just get on my little preacher box here. They've known about nitrogen leaching since the early 1960s.